to Axe of the Blood God presents The State of Final Fantasy. We are here to talk about all things Final Fantasy, Square Enix, and, I don't know, jobs, classes, summoning gods.
Eidolons.
Have you all played a Final Fantasy? I'm worried.
I've never heard of Final Fantasy.
What's Final Fantasy again? What are we doing here? I
thought it was fighting fantasy.
I thought we were talking about Mega Man. What happened? Wait.
We're already off to a bad start.
I don't know.
Joining me today, I am one of the co-hosts of Axe of the Blood God, an RPG podcast. Over here is Nadia Oxford, another one of my co-hosts. Nadia, say hello, people. Say hello to Nadia.
Hi, everyone. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. We're really glad to have you, and we're going to have a good time, I think. And
hell yeah.
Yeah.
We're also joined by Ash Paulson of Good Vibes Gaming.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming. Great to see you all here.
And down there on the end, we got Scott White of RPG University, famously known as the person who found the font fix for the FF Pixel Remaster and shared it everywhere. So if your font looks good, it's his doing right there.
Hell yeah.
It's going to be a grand cross old time.
So we're gonna get this started off pretty simple. Our idea is we're gonna take stock, we're gonna take note of what is Final Fantasy, where it's been, where it is right now, and where it is going. We're gonna start with, what is Final Fantasy? Well, Webster's dictionary defines it as. You've got the numbered entries. It's that's pretty basic. And then there's spin-offs. There's Tactics and Crystal Chronicles and the like. And really the MMO is kind of its own thing when you really get down to it. And there's remasters and remakes and whatever Stranger of Paradise is. Have you heard about
chaos.
Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon?
It's chaos.
Chaos.
It's excellent. So we broke it down into 3 simple, easy-to-digest sections, and that is starting with the past. And the past is pretty simple when you think about it. It is, what is Square Enix doing with the past of Final Fantasy in terms of remasters and remakes, and is it doing it well? So let's start with Mr. Pixel Remaster down there at the end. Scott White, what do you think about the Pixel remasters and what they've been doing with them?
First and foremost, I think it's stupid they're not on any console.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, isn't
Thank
it
you.
great?
That's the main thing. God.
I think as a package, they're really strong entries. The soundtrack, the new arrangements are probably the best aspect of the Pixel remasters. But yeah, as a whole, I think some of their marketing has been really weird with them, especially their initial reveal being like a minute only after 20 minutes of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That was such a,
It was weird.
That was an event.
Yeah.
But overall, I think they're incredibly strong packages, especially Final Fantasy III. This is really the first time that English speakers, legally, I guess I should say, are able to play the original rendition of it. So that's really cool. And I think overall, really strong. They just need to be on consoles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's going to happen sooner rather than later. They must know.
I want to say yes, but the problem I have is that a lot of people don't know the best version of Secret of Mana is stuck on the iPhone and has been there for like 12
Good point.
years.
Yep.
And I've been dying to have this thing on the Switch. And when the Mana collection came out, I said, oh, here we go. No, we did not go. It
The
was
water reflections in the iOS version.
It was
so pretty.
great.
Yeah.
I can only say good things for the most part about the iOS. They actually redid all the sprites, but I don't want to get to Secret of Mana, even though I will if you let me. I actually agree that Final Fantasy, the past, for the most part, is quite good. Like, aside from the Pixel remasters, I would thoroughly recommend for Final Fantasy IV the PSP game, the complete collection.
Yeah,
and I think Ash is with me. We will defend
Totally.
After Years. We're here for After Years.
Oh,
okay?
no.
Like a fanfic.
No.
It's like a playable
Why did you let
fanfic
them
in the
on this
best and
panel?
worst ways. But that final battle theme's a banger, though, in After Years.
But I will say the one thing that really disappoints me, I've said in the past that Square is like 3 kids in a trench coat, and whereas they do excellent work for the most part with their Pixel remasters, what is going on with things like, say, Chrono Cross and other, there have been other lackluster releases, like when they first released Chrono Trigger for Steam, it was a disgrace, and I don't use that, I don't use that word lightly. But to their credit, though, they really built it back up and fixed it, and everything's great, except it's not on consoles, so I don't know.
That's kind of the thing that I keep taking away from this, is that the Pixel Remaster seems like it's enough. It gets it onto a platform and gets it modernly playable, but is enough like really what Final Fantasy should be getting at this
Exactly.
point.
Right.
It is hard to not have envious gazes towards what's, and, I say this as someone who is very excited for the Live Alive remake,
Same.
which looks absolutely
Dragon Quest 3, it looks
Yeah,
amazing.
2D, hell yeah.
You look at that, and I think that when footage of that was coming out was around the time that footage of the 6-pixel remaster was going around,
Yeah.
and it was just not a great side-by-side comparison of the two. And so, especially because they're locked to one platform, at least for right now, it really does feel like we've got something, but it could be at least a little bit more. If it's not going to be an HD 2D, at least make it more widely available. And we've had friend of the show down here, Jesse Vitelli, was informing me that the Steam Deck version of Final Fantasy IV apparently rips, is real good. But that's a very special circumstance.
Yeah.
Right. What's kind of weird about FF6 in particular, though, is that they decided to kind of slightly go in on the HD 2D thing with the opera
Yeah.
scene, but only that.
Didn't
and it
commit.
was really, they didn't commit to it. It was really weird.
I do like the fact that they gave that sort of attention to the opera, because of course the opera is one of the most iconic scenes in video gaming. But I do also have to give a shout out to Square Enix for their remasters of 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. I think those are
10 and
actually
10 2HD. Very good.
If you listen to Actually Blood God, and you should plug, we had a report, a Final Fantasy IX report, because I had not played Final Fantasy IX. So I started playing it, and we
shame.
talked about it episode by episode.
It's fine.
And if I had not had the fast forward feature on the Switch, I think I would have given up a lot
Yep.
earlier, because I loved the game, but the poor PlayStation could not take it.
Well, I've heard
Yeah.
very good things about stuff like Zodiac Age and stuff that too.
Zodiac
Yes.
Age is
I
fantastic.
was looking at downloading that before we
Fantastic.
flew out here because I've heard it really touches that game up in a lot of ways. So-
Zodiac Age is the only way I could play 12 straight up.
Yeah.
It improves on it so much.
Okay, so that's what they're doing with their remasters, with their old games. But what about their remakes? Let's talk about the Final Fantasy VII remake. I mean, do we have fans of the Final Fantasy VII remake, y'all? They, wow, some sickos
Nay.
over here.
Who keeps saying that?
It's weird how they just decided to make it even more heartbreaking when some of those characters die, because they're like, what if we give characters that die more screen time and make you care more
That's a
about
good
Uh-huh.
idea.
Yeah.
That's how you. That's
Shout out
good
to
advice.
Thirsty Jesse.
it? Look,
All the
look,
shout outs
yeah.
to Thirsty Jesse.
we all want to embody the chaotic energy of Jesse at all times.
I have
Oh,
to
yeah.
say,
Yeah.
that the thing I love most about Final Fantasy VII Remake is I was so worried that they do Advent Children Cloud, who was all gruff and angry and
Right.
sad. He went back to being a dork, and Cloud was always a dork who never knew who he was or where he was, and kind of needed his friends to prop him up and say, hey, here's your head, here's your ass, here's where you need to go. And he's like, thanks. dude."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how he wound up in a
13
dress.
plus, right?
That's how he wound up in dress. He looks good in a dress.
Yeah.
He rocks it. Oh.
That and the, sorry, go ahead.
I wasn't saying
Oh, I thought
anything.
you were, my bad.
Nope, you're good.
So that and the fact, I think my main fear going into 7 Remake, and I loved it, by the way,
I loved
was
it
that I was afraid they were going to sanitize it, because the original 7 was
Right.
really just weird, and it had an edge to it that was very specific to that game, and I was a little worried where it would smooth over those edges and sanitize it, but then you get to Wall Market, and they didn't. It's just as weird and seedy as it was in the original, and they nailed it.
I would actually
So
give
good.
a shout out to, of course, I'm going to bring up Final Fantasy 14 here, but
course.
I think there was a change
You've got
in
a
Square
whole
Enix's
section
writing.
for 14.
I think there was a shift in Square Enix's writing, because one thing I noticed about 14 that was the same in 7 Remake is there was a lot more grit. People weren't very chaste. They weren't like 15, which I love 15. I love the boys, but they were kind of like porcelain dolls. Whereas like in Final Fantasy 14, this guy's like, oh crap, we got chlamydia. And nobody got chlamydia in Remake yet, but the idea is there are still people. It still has that edge. It still has that, hey, we're human beings. We have spiky hair, but we're human beings, and we go to the bathroom.
I really wish someone had put that like in with their review of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Where's the
Where's
chlamydia?
the chlamydia?
Not enough
Pluses-
chlamydia, 7.8.
Yeah. Pluses, great graphics, great gameplay. Minuses, no disease. It's really weird.
Yeah.
No STDs.
That should be a new requirement, like graphics, sound, chlamydia. No.
Thumbs
Yeah,
up, thumbs
absolutely.
down. I will say, to your point about keeping it weird, still one of my favorite parts of the Final Fantasy VII Remake is the section where Cloud has the fever dream about Sephiroth and then tries to swing his sword, and it's
so
too big.
good.
That is such a good physical
Yeah.
gag that I was sitting there and I was like, is Square not taking this? But like Square doesn't take itself seriously. It's fun when it's not taking itself too seriously.
No, absolutely.
I mean, look at the Dementors that they put into Final Fantasy. But also that is, I think, Square grappling with the legacy of 7, and that's why I like 7 Remake so much, is because it feels like a work that is aware like the huge question of how do you remake something like Final Fantasy VII?
Right.
Probably
Right.
one of the most influential and impactful RPGs ever made. It brought the series essentially over to the West for a huge generation and made Final Fantasy what it is today. And you tell someone, hey, remake it. Do it again. What? No.
Yeah.
So what do? You put Dementors in and you have Cloud fight the Dementors.
It had no right being as good as it ended up being.
Yeah, it was
Agreed.
Really,
Like,
it just landed.
It did land. It was the culmination of everything I feel like Square wanted to do with Final Fantasy since the reveal trailer of Final Fantasy XIII and like Advent Children. Like, it had steadily been working and they'd been trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And they landed with Final Fantasy VII Remake.
They did, and there's one particular moment that just made my brain explode because I have to say, obviously the soundtrack was incredible, right?
Yeah.
And but there's that one moment where you get to Genova Dreamweaver and you hear the Genova theme, and it's like, it's more atmospheric and it doesn't quite hit the way you hoped it would. But then you get to stage 2. And then you get to stage 3, and the theme really kicks
Yeah.
in, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I can't believe this. They nailed it.
It's interesting with Final Fantasy, and it's talking about the remakes and the remasters. You never know what you are going to get in terms of quality when Square remakes or does something with these games.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You have no idea what it's going to be.
They go anyway.
Will you
Three
have
kids
that
in a
like
trench coat.
Yeah.
weird color blobby iOS PC port, or will you
Nightmare.
have like Final Fantasy VII Remake, where Dementors are cool and you get to fight them and
Like
fever
I
dreams?
said, 3 kids in a trench coat. I don't
Right.
understand.
Exactly.
You
Right.
don't know what you're going to get. It's a grab bag.
I was reminded as I was looking at games to play on my Switch on the way out here. I was reminded of Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition.
That was a thing.
Gosh, I
Yeah.
forgot
That
about
was a thing, and they're selling it for $30 on the Nintendo eShop, and I almost pulled the trigger on it because I just want to know,
I played it on iOS. It's not very good.
You're
I
not
mean, it's
missing anything.
okay. But the thing about Final Fantasy 15, the best thing is that you are in a car with the top down and you're playing Genova while you pull into a gas station. Like, that's the whole experience for Final Fantasy 15.
Nothing
Yeah.
better than
But
this.
does it have
Guys.
chlamydia?
Right?
I don't know. Prompto's up to stuff.
It does have a bunch of new recipes.
Did you know?
I found a new recipe,
Prompto,
Noctis. This should help.
Sweet little Prompto is wearing a vest that has a patch, and you can't really see it that well. But if you look it up, it says, "What a beautiful day! Now wait for someone to fuck it up." I swear to God, this is true. I swear to God, all of you, look it up.
I had not heard that. It did have the Cup Noodle quest, though, which is pretty great.
That
was pretty great. Gladio going in on,
There's no shit.
amazing beat.
Talking about modern Square Enix and putting product plugs in the
Coleman's
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 15 brought to you by Coleman's.
Right?
Yeah, Final Fantasy XIV's KFC tie-ins and all that. I'm almost wondering what Final Fantasy 16 will have tied in at some point. The Excedrin booth is out there. Maybe they're going to make it in.
Chick Hydrobot is
No.
going to be a raid
Chick
boss.
Hydrobot is okay. Look, don't tempt me with good time.
Oh, dear Lord.
But so here's the big question about the remakes. How do we feel about them breaking it up into parts? I feel like that's one of the weirder parts of all this. And
I would feel a lot better if we knew where the hell the next parts were.
Yeah,
We have heard
yeah.
nothing about anything, so that worries me a little.
I think it's obviously, I get why people don't like that it's in parts. I would prefer to have the whole thing at once. But I think, you also have to consider the reality of modern game development. You can't remake a game as giant as FF7 with modern assets
Yeah.
and expect it to come out, anytime before 2030 maybe. And and the cost would be astronomical. I feel like they almost had to cut it into parts.
I have heard that basically Midgard is the first part, and this is just a rumor that the next part's going to be a lot more open, and it could be why it's taking so long.
it would make sense with this.
Kind of like when you
redirect.
leave and you they
Right.
call him for the first time.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of money to resurrect Zack,
Where's that?
Yeah.
All the money's going
that's
to
what
dog
that's what we've learned
propaganda.
from this.
All the money's going to dog propaganda. There you go.
Exactly.
What was the name of that dog in 7 Remake?
Are you talking about Red?
No, not he's a
No,
a
the
cat.
little artwork.
The little
the
artwork.
wartime
Wait,
doggo.
wait,
Wartime dog.
God, I can't remember.
Stamp.
Stamp. I was like,
They had-
Sparky? No, Stamp.
He had a song and everything.
Scampy.
The song was in my head for ages.
Yep. Yeah.
They just need to make Fort Condor its own game. That's all I want. Is I need them to port Fort Condor to iOS so I can just play it forever.
I would love that actually.
That was
I
the
would like that very
best
much.
part of the intermission.
Add it to Final Fantasy XIV's Golden Saucer.
But
Oh,
yeah,
no.
yeah, yes.
And I'd never leave the gold.
Take me away from Triple Triad, please.
Yeah.
A little variety. I was a lot more hesitant and kind of unnerved by the multiple part trilogy or quadrilogy or whatever it will be with Final Fantasy VII Remake before I played Remake, and then seeing just the quality of it, I was like, okay, if they can do every game as good as they did this, fleshing out the areas and everything, I'm like, it's a bummer, but I'm kind of okay with it too now.
I think it's going to work out. I just do agree with that. Like, I want to know where it's headed. And
Yeah.
hopefully, one might assume that with the cadence of these things, we might be hearing soon. But that would be nice, to know more. I mean, what else could we possibly ask for from Square Enix when looking upon their past? How did that? I don't know how that slide got in there. It's really weird. But
Yes.
I do agree with it. Anyways, let's talk about the present, which is really just. Have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV with an expanded free trial, which you can play through the entirety of World Reborn and the award-winning Heaven's Word, an expansion up to level 60 for free with no restrictions on play.
If a new expansion comes out, though, you might be screwed. You might have to wait a bit.
No, I haven't.
Oh, do I have news
Let
for
me
you?
tell you about the reason why I don't sleep anymore. It's called Grahatia, and and I just cry. But seriously, as someone who got bit by the bug in December, in December on the 28th, remember the 28th of December, I started playing Final Fantasy XIV and said, guess I'll give this thing a shot. It is now, April 22nd today, and I have finished 5.0.
Wow. Well done.
So that's how my social life has been going.
Now, my
But-
favorite
Yeah.
thing, though, is when Eric started playing, he goes through a Realm Reborn, of course, and everyone complains about, this is so bad, your Andre's an idiot, and he tells me, man, I saw this part in the game and it made me cry. And I'm like, if you are crying at a Realm Reborn, you don't understand how screwed you are.
Right.
It was really
you
sad.
sweet
You
summer
beat
child.
Garuda and you come back and everything's all messed up in the sands.
You
and all
cried
new
at that? I mean, I'm not saying it's not sad, but like,
It's like heavily implied that people died.
the things I have seen, child, the things you will see, child.
Yeah, now I can understand some of that, but I think that's worth talking about because really the present of Final Fantasy is 14. Like it's hard to think of other things that Final Fantasy is doing right now that is not 14. We already talked about the remasters and the remakes, but as it is right now as a series, this is really kind of what Final Fantasy is, and I think that's good. I think Final Fantasy 14 is a wonderful video game, but it's also kind of become the pillar of Square Enix in some
In fact, their
Right.
latest expansions, they're doing a lot to make it a much more friendly single-player experience. And this is a very friendly single-player experience to begin with. So they are really adding in things like you don't have to team up with other people to go through dungeons. You can team up with your characters. Like, again, I'll say his name, Grahatia. He's my all-rounder boy.
I do
He's my
love that.
boy. He's my boy.
No, that's something, that's like an olive branch to someone like me, which I'm so glad Nadia hasn't disowned me yet. She's one of my dearest friends, but I'm sorry to say I'm not an MMO guy, and I just really haven't had the time to commit to Final Fantasy XIV.
I understand.
I played a little bit of it. I like it. I know how awesome it is. The soundtrack is amazing, especially, but I just don't have the time. But I did get to level 8 and got to outside of my starting city. That's everything, right? I pretty much
You
beat the whole game.
experienced the entire.
You're done.
Cool.
You saved the
good.
world.
You're good.
Congratulations.
You're
But
good.
no, I appreciate that because I'm not, as I said, not an MMO guy, but you tell me that I can play through it single player, that gets me more interested. So it is still on my radar. It's just I need the time to do it.
It's always about time.
Yeah.
It does suck you in.
One thing I will say though is, well, Square is head over heels with the success of Final Fantasy XIV and 16 coming and everything. I don't think it would do a disservice to the Final Fantasy community at large. Just especially with the modding community, with older games, especially as so many of these are on PC. You have such wonderful mods, such as Final Fantasy IX's Mogiri mod, that
Oh, yeah.
makes it incredibly rich, detailed. It's like AI upscaling of the backgrounds. You have the fantastic tournament and communities rising up around the randomizers like Final Fantasy V Career Day, Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide, Final Fantasy IV Free Enterprise that turns these games, these classics, into amazing scavenger hunts that communities have grown up around and do, like, run tournaments. You have tournaments running for speed running, like a Narsh run, where people will race each other getting to Narsh in Final Fantasy VI. You have a group on Twitch that has devised commands and whatnot that will like automatically simulate Final Fantasy Tactic fights with randomly generated parties
Yeah, we're
that
talking
you can
about
like add yourself to
Tactics
Final Fantasy
cool.
Tactics Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
You have T Edition for Final Fantasy VI. You have Abyssinum's Beyond Chaos, which randomly changes Final Fantasy VI. There's so much amazing things you have that the community is doing. I think with a lot of like the remasters, the remakes, whether it's Chrono Cross or the Pixel remasters, Square will take a step forward, but there's usually always a step back or something they botch. And
Something big.
Right.
It's always something big.
exactly,
That's
Square
fun.
does
Who wants to read?
themselves a lot of disservice, and a lot of the popularity and kind of spectacle of Final Fantasy right now is being carried and done by these passionate communities behind these games. Like even the Pixel Remaster font, there's a community that's sprung up that added all sorts of different fantasy fonts. You can do this Mr. Saturn font in the Pixel
Oh, God,
Remasters if you
kill me.
want
That's
because
so
of that
cool.
swap.
Seriously?
Or
I love that.
the Dragon Quest stuff.
Yeah.
People have redone sprites that replaces Zeramis in Final Fantasy IV for these randomizers that will turn them into like Schick Hydrobot Zeramis. Like it's mind-blowing what these communities have done.
See, I'm console trash, so to me, I'm thinking, okay, Final Fantasy mod. Here's one that gives Cloud a giant dong or something like that, and that's where it starts.
There are those too.
Of course, there's those. That's all I know.
Yeah, but it's the Final Fantasy community
Yes.
and the
So I know
passionate
that.
projects
That's good to know.
that these people have been able to do that I think are really carrying a lot of the weight right now, despite Square's occasional misstep with the franchise that should
Absolutely.
not be understated.
Nadia, I just can't take you anywhere.
You
We're
knew what you were getting into. I don't
we're
understand you.
20 minutes into a panel. You already brought out the Buster Dong. Like that's
I didn't say Buster Dong, but now you're giving me an
I like
intro.
that more. I
no,
like
but now
that.
that went into my head and it's a thought. And if I don't get it out, it just.
Do we have any fan artists among us?
Mod community, you know what to do.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. I think especially the difference between Scott and Nadia here illustrates the difference between Square of past and Square of present, which is the stuff used to only exist on consoles. It was a disc that you bought and you played it a bunch and you bought the Prima guide for it and all that. But then you get to nowadays and these games are moddable. And shout outs to people like the Speedrunners, RPG Limit Break, those kinds of folks that really pick these games apart and find new life in them, because it is kind of like playing a whole new game. I played a bunch of Final Fantasy Tactics recently when we were doing our Pantheon for it, and it was amazing to have mods that were just like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to always slot in JP up on every character while you were
Forget about it,
leveling?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, some might argue that's taking away from the spirit of things, but also I am a grown man with a lot of time that I have to put into Final Fantasy XIV. So playing tactics matches between, gate rotations at the Golden Saucer so I can get my near pod mount, because that's what life is nowadays.
There's a tactics mod actually that adds a new additional classes as well.
Why
Like
are you doing this to me?
Oh, man.
Everything
I'm
I
spreading
said
good word.
has made it clear that I am susceptible to things like this. Don't put me near gacha. Don't put me near
no,
mods.
I'm just saying it's good.
There is something really quick I do want to bring up. It's not exactly a mod, and it kind of straddles the line between present and past, but there is that weirdly touched up remaster, I guess, if you want to call it, of Final Fantasy XIII on the Xbox Series consoles.
Yeah, it runs really good on Xbox.
And that's only
Series.
on Xbox Series, but
Yeah.
they didn't really say much about it. They were just like, hey, we're putting it out, but guess what?
They do that
Looks
a
and
lot,
runs even
don't they?
better.
Here's
Yeah.
a great
Yeah.
here's a great remaster. We're not talking about it, like the aforementioned Secret of Mana.
Right. And I mean, and for
This
me,
fell off the
like,
cart, and I guess y'all could take it.
Yeah, and I just thought that was cool to see, because I'm, as one of the staunch Final Fantasy XIII defenders out there, despite its problems, I was happy to see them give that game some love.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was kind of cool, a cool thing that happened.
It needs the love. It is a much maligned
Oh, that's
entry
for
in the
sure.
series.
There are dozens of us.
Dozens.
Yeah.
I feel like 13 has its fans, like has a broad set of fans, and then with each entry in that trilogy, it gets like smaller and smaller. It's like a
Yeah.
well
Little
downwards.
funnel.
I
Yeah,
can't
a
defend Lightning Returns, but I will. Nice. But I will defend 13-2 to my dying breath.
We're
I have
never
good
we're
things
never
about
doing a
13 too,
Normandy
which
season on
basically-
Lightning Returns.
Pat says it's
Oh, that, yeah, crazy chocobo. It's crazy. Yeah.
Crazy chocobos.
Thinking back, Lightning Returns is like a very early proto Final Fantasy VII remake.
It really, like, you look at Final Fantasy VII Remake and you see a lot of that. We were also recently playing Final Fantasy X too for Normandy FM. I will plug things while I'm up here.
Nice.
And that also, you can like see a lineage between dress spheres to the idea of like composing an entire party on the fly to then a lot of the combat systems and kind of quick switch stuff that Final Fantasy VII Remake had. It was cool to see.
You know, that would make a really good panel.
Who could say? We would have done that on our panel, brainstorming PAX panels, but sadly that one did not get accepted.
Next time.
Anything else on the present of Square? What do we think Square's at right now? Like, what else do they
It is so
got?
hard to gauge because they're leaning a lot. Whatever they're paying Yoshi P, it is not enough. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true. That's
Whenever I see his name on the credits, I'm like, that man is not getting enough money.
Yeah.
But that right now, 14 is their, God, it's their cash cow. So they're treating that like gold, and everything else is just kind of following in behind. I would just like to know more about Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. Like, that's all I
Yeah.
want right now.
Well,
and 16 is, well, who knows?
Well, if we want to talk about that, we could go to the future.
Oh, so edgy.
Come on, I like him. I like what I see so far of 16. I know a lot of people are. Again, I'm going to invoke the name of Yoshi P because I have a lot of faith in him and what he's done and how he is as a writer and a developer. And I think Koji Fox is on this as well. So how it plays, we'll see. How it is, who knows? But I think it looks kind of cool. I'm looking forward to it.
I have faith in Yoshi B by proxy because I know how many people love 14's story. I have to say, I was a little disappointed when we first saw 16's debut trailer, and I've watched it, and I was like, one of the first times since 12, really, that I had seen a trailer or for a new Final Fantasy that I was like, I'm probably going to be into this when it comes out, but I'm not like really excited yet. And I
But
was
12
a
is
little bit,
great, though. I understand what you mean, because when the trailers first came out for 12, I was there, too. I said, oh, this looks like not a Final Fantasy. But then I learned that Balthier and Fran are like the best characters in the series. So.
They are super cool, but unfortunately, I'm just not a big 12 fan. I'm
Oh,
glad
there's your
everyone out there
problem.
loves it, but it's not for me. But yeah, it's just 16 so far. I believe that it's going to be great. I want to believe in it, but I'm just not there yet.
See, it alternates because you've got 12, very political story, intrigue, nations fight, a very tactics style story, obviously with the evilly stuff and all that.
I'm Captain Bosch. I'm Captain Bosch von Ronsenberg.
13, very like anime Final Fantasy. If you
Anime as
will.
hell.
Yeah. 14, back to the intrigue, back to the governments, and then 15, anime as hell. Like, basically a shoujo anime. Am I using that right?
Shonen, yeah.
I don't know.
You know what I liked about 15 though is it came out at a time when it was still a little unusual to have like bromance. Like nowadays,
Yeah.
it's more acceptable for like men to be like friends and hang out and fix each other's clothes. But back then, I remember I don't know if anyone else remembered this, but Conan O'Brien's Clueless Gamer thing when he was playing Final Fantasy 15, just making fun of it.
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, and the boys were commenting on Luna Freya's wedding dress, and he's like, "Oh, how can they do? That's so stupid." The boys commenting, and I said, "Why can't they like pretty dresses?" And
I
that
agree.
was kind of the start of the characters being a little more like, and
They were
I agree
allowed
with
to
that.
emote. There were
Yeah.
four guys who loved each other who were allowed to emote and have an honest friendship, which, as you said, Nadia, you don't see that kind of positive masculinity portrayed in games very
Exactly.
often, even today.
Yeah.
Oh no, go play Gears of War.
Well, fair enough. That's true enough.
Just guys being dudes and that.
That was better than this. Just guys being dudes.
Dude, bro, the game.
Yeah, but I will say to 15, and something that I think is a larger evolution in RPGs now, what I love about 15 is that it starts you with a party, and that party pretty much stays the same the whole time, and it
Yeah.
really lets those characters start to evolve and breathe. And obviously one of the problems with 15, we probably should have talked about this in the past, was how it was broken up and segmented over so many pieces.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
some of it didn't even come out. What happened with episode Arden? Where did that end up? And there was episode Luna Freya that never
Final Fantasy
happened.
15 was a weird situation. They kind of built the game like they're putting down tracks as we were playing.
Yeah.
Fabula Novala Crystales.
Oh, God. And you
Remember
can
that?
literally, like, as you play through
What did you just
15
call me?
What did you say about my mother?
That's the trilogy or the series of games that were all branched, like from Final Fantasy 13 versus 13.
Babufala is the other. That's the Shin Megami Tensei panel.
Babula.
That's down the...
No, when you play through 15, you can, I mean, there was so much, I like 15, but there was
I
so
like
much
15.
wasted potential because you can see literally where the story was stitched together and they had to pull stuff out. And it's just, if they had been able to release it in its full vision, I feel like it could have been something.
It kind of
incredibly
helped
special.
that 15 came out when I had surgery and I was on really strong painkillers. And
Yeah.
when I started the game, I actually thought it was adorable the way Carbuncle, who is like his Nox like totem Eidolon, was talking to him through the cell phone, and I'm like, holy shit, that's adorable and amazing.
It also had really cool dungeons.
It did.
Really cool dungeons.
The
yeah.
Pitias dungeon was one of the coolest things I've ever played in a
Yeah.
Final Fantasy game, straight up. And
Yep.
if y'all have not seen that in Final Fantasy 15, y'all gotta check that out. The Pitias dungeon rules. But it is, to bring it on back to the future, it makes me wonder where they're going with 16, because I actually rewatched the trailer before when I was getting ready for this panel, and I was like, man, post 14, this is giving me a lot of 14 vibes. Obviously, you know, it's got the right team on it and all that, but it is making me wonder, what does the vision of Final Fantasy look like when, especially RPGs in general, are trending towards action? They're trending
Yeah.
towards this mix, almost like the Tales series was ahead of its time.
Nice.
You're onto something there. I
See,
mean-
don't pinch your temples
Tales
at me,
fans
Jesse
represent.
Vitelli. It's-
I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest. Tales of Arise was my first like Tales fan and Tales game.
Oh, nice.
And I really enjoyed it. Like Vesperia was my first one on the Switch, which was also fantastic. But Arise, the way it implemented like those Dragon Ball Z fights, I really
Right.
had a great time. I can't deny it.
but do we think that's the way forward for
It
RPGs
doesn't
this day?
bother me
is-
that much. Like I don't know. When I think I almost feel like these days with Square, they want their traditional turn-based stuff to be Dragon Quest and everything crazy and jumping off the fence and screaming "I can fly." That's over in Final Fantasy land.
I would add too that they also want that. You know, they've basically built the Bravely series up to that Octopath
Yes.
Traveler.
Yeah, that's
And
true,
so
that's
I
true.
think as long as they keep, you know, as long as those games keep being healthy and they keep being made, I'm okay with.
As long as
mainline
they
Final
feed
Fantasy.
me.
Yeah, like give me Bravely Third. You know, as long as they keep making those traditional type games, I'm okay with modern Final Fantasies trending toward action. I know it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
and It's not
I mean,
necessarily.
if I can adapt to Final Fantasy XIV, making me do weird like Naruto things with my fingers to
Right.
to fight, then I can adapt to whatever 16 throws at me.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is we need Project Quadrangle strategy is what we need.
obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Clearly,
Well, what they need
Wouldn't
is
that just be Project Square?
the world is square.
The world is square. Oh, I know, right? Oh, right.
That's too much.
Yeah.
That's too much for this panel.
Yeah, right there.
But what else does the future look like for Square? I mean, so we've got Final Fantasy Remake Part 2. We're obviously all wondering where that's going to go, if it's going to take the open world approach that it seems like it could, given how Final Fantasy VII set out and eventually went after you got out of Midgar. But, I mean,
I think that basically you're looking at a future where 16 is going to be whatever it's going to be, and people are cheering for it.
Woo! Yeah. Cool.
fans of Final
They
Fantasy
really
VII
like
Remake out there,
the
baby.
band,
Love us.
even
They
though
really
they're
love
not
us.
in here.
Team Tifa or Team Aerith crowd.
But I think that in terms of sure plans, the only thing we're going to get any sort of guesswork out of is 14, which is the next expansion is surely coming soon.
You
Like,
spoil 6.1 on this stage, I will flip this table over.
I will say the
Nadia.
Rage song is a banger, an absolute
Okay.
banger. Yes.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I really am curious about, especially with the future of Final Fantasy, I think Final Fantasy will be their big budget, like, this is how pretty we can make games.
Yeah.
How many more Frank Sinatra songs do we think will be
Oh my
worked
God.
into
I'm
Final
shocked
Fantasy?
they paid for
wild.
We
that.
got Fly Me to the Moon.
That's my favorite thing when Square
That would've
Enix
been
just
good for
breaks out
Endwalker.
like a random licensed song. Like remember 15 started
they
with
not
"Stand by Me." Who was it? Who
Right.
did that? Was it Florence and the Machine?
Florence and the Machine did Stand By Me. For
Right.
That was very,
It
very
was actually
good.
very good. I liked it
Yeah.
very much.
And
But
13 had the Leona Lewis song, My Hands, I think it was called, which was just random.
oh right.
A Prada
Totally.
designer, no, Louis Vuitton was Final Fantasy 13.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
They had the whole lightning, like,
Lightning
back
fashion
thing. That
line,
was
yeah.
so
Actually,
weird.
when that happened, I used to work for USgamer.net, and when that happened, we decided, hey, let's do a fun thing where like characters are all promoting something that they like is related to them. So I did Papyrus from Undertale. He's promoting spaghetti sauce ragu or something. So
I love that.
yeah.
So what do we think about the potential? I believe it's now heavily rumored at this point. We'll take it up to rumor level of a Final Fantasy IX remake. Is that something that we care about? Is that something that we want? Does 9 need a remake?
I feel like the Switch version's very good, but if we're talking about like are we talking about like a Final Fantasy VII style remake, or are we talking about like?
I don't think
it was in the NVIDIA.
It's on that magic NVIDIA
right.
leak that seems to keep proving right over and
Exactly.
over again.
I think that there will be something like that. I think fans should keep their expectations in check. I think it will range between the Chrono Cross kind of Radical
Right.
Dreamers edition, where they slightly update character models so they're a bit more detailed, and Trials of Mana. I think it will fall somewhere in that range of remake.
Right.
I don't see them putting that much money to do like a 7 remake.
I do
experience.
feel like Square Enix doesn't like to put a lot of money into their past as much as they should. They should, I don't want to sound like a stuffy old woman here, but it's like they should honor their past. I'm serious.
I mean, the fact that Chrono Trigger isn't on modern consoles yet is just
Chrono Trigger, I mean,
absurd.
spoiler alert, Axe of the Blood God rated the best RPGs of all time, and surprise, Chrono Trigger was #1, and
Oh, hell yeah.
I thoroughly
Should be.
believe
As it
that
should be. Nice.
it is the best RPG of all time, and it
Hell yeah.
deserves to be more than that botched Steam port. Like, again, they fixed that, which is great, but okay, why not take it a bit further? Take it on the Switch, take it everywhere it's not.
This panel really is just us going like looking at the entire Square Enix catalog and being like, put it on the Switch. Just put it on
That's all
the
it
Switch.
takes.
Yeah.
It's just all
Easy
the
as pie.
decisions Square makes. And I think Nintendo's in the same camp. They're in the I don't like to make money camp, where they just have so many things they could do and just don't.
Could there be a perception of flooding the market though? Like I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm going to say like, would there be a perception of they're another one of the developers? If you've ever gone down the new releases of the Switch eShop, do it. It's a it's a journey.
It is, yeah.
And do they want to be seen as the company that's just shoveling things onto there, or do they want to space them out?
We're
Do they
not
wanna
talking
keep them
about carnival
there?
games here. We're talking about like very prestigious old RPGs that deserve to be played and replayed. There's just no reason for them to be there.
Maybe
It
it's
worked
like a-
when it was on the Wii. The Wii eShop got updates on their classic titles
Yeah.
every week. There's that
Yeah.
amazing
have the
Twitter
Wii
account
eShop
every
again.
Wednesday with the Wii eShop update day. So,
Right.
I bought every single part of the After Years off that shop.
I did too. Yep, same. That's where
And
I
then
played
I
it.
played it in the
Sickos.
PSP collection
Yep.
again.
Oh, I didn't do that. I didn't go that far. I completely agree with your take, by the way, on this rumored FF9 remake. I think it's not going to be to the level of FF7, but I do think it's going to be something in the middle there. And actually, speaking to a previous slide, FF Tactics Remaster was part of that leak as well.
Ah.
It was. It
So
was.
Maybe we're going to get it.
I
Might
mean,
happen.
look, I don't have hopes anymore. That's an easy way to get
All
your
my
heart
hopes are
broken.
dead.
Yeah.
Bottom of the ocean.
But my pitch for an FF9 remake would be a simple one, and it's 100% more VV. Just get more VV in that game, and,
Yep.
and you've done well.
Speaking of Vivi, have you played Chocobo GP?
Are you talking about Chocobo GP, or are you talking about Chocobo Racing?
Chocobo GP.
Okay,
specifically the new one.
I specifically did not play GP because I love Chocobo Racing. It was
Okay.
actually my first kart racer. I got it on the PlayStation because my dad bought me that and like one other game. I don't remember what it was. I think it was like a Tetris game. But Chocobo Racing owned, and
Sure.
I have golden, rosy memories of that, and I don't want to tarnish them.
That's fair. I mean, Chocobo GP has its issues, but the reason I say that is because the story mode is actually incredibly well written for
Don't do this to
longtime
me,
Final
Ash.
Fantasy fans.
Don't do this to
And
me, Ash.
Vivi is part of that.
You're
And
doing this to me.
I am
Vivi's
doing
also
it.
in Kingdom Hearts 2. You could just play that.
That's
And
well, that's
only
true.
have to pay for it once.
Yeah, but they completely take the piss out of some Final Fantasy tropes and like dramatic lines and repurp. It's really good. I can't
It
recommend.
can't be worse than All the Bravest, if anyone remembers that.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I had forgotten
Screen.
about it. Thanks, Nadia. Now I.
If
now
you
I remember again.
ever have me playing All the Bravest for whatever godforsaken reason, if you look at the descriptions they have for the enemies and the characters, nobody gave a shit, and they're actually hilarious to read because it's clear nobody even bothered to double check it.
Right.
I do, before we move on, I just want to say shout outs to Nomura for Trojan horsing Final Fantasy Versus 13 back into the world through Kingdom Hearts 4.
Hell yeah.
You love to see it, the dedication, the sheer dedication.
He's been playing 4D chess all this time with us, and I love it.
That's the chessboard that they're playing in
Yeah.
all the trailers. That's what's
So expensive. That chessboard is so
So
expensive.
we're gonna let people line up for questions. If you want to ask us stuff about RPGs, about Final Fantasy, if you have any takes, if you want to get up there and tell us why Team Tifa beats Team Aerith or anything else, you get on up there to the microphones on either side of the aisle. I'm gonna signal like a flight attendant. But as people get lined up, I'm gonna just run down. Give me your quick take. Starting with Scott, how do you feel about the state of Final Fantasy?
Looking bright, thanks in no small part to the community.
Nadia?
I think it looks good, but I'm also just like a complete monster for Final Fantasy XIV, and I like where that's going. So
Ash, how are you feeling?
I feel pretty okay about it. It could be better. I'm not sure about 16 yet, but I loved 7 Remake, and I cannot wait for Part 2.
I would simply like a new Dissidia. I don't feel like we've had enough Dissidia in our lives. And that is the one game brave enough to make Jekt a playable character, and that's art.
You know what? I'll take you a new Dissidia and raise you a new theater rhythm. Give me a new
I will
theater
take
rhythm,
another one of those.
please.
Can it be both? Can it be both?
Sure.
Okay,
Let's-
cool.
let's make it
with
happen.
social links.
Stranger spin-offs
it's a
have
social.
happened. Sid rhythm? Dissidia rhythm?
You know, that actually works.
Dissidium?
That actually works.
Theaticidia. We
That
don't have chlamydia in Final Fantasy, but we do have
Theaticidia?
Theaticidia.
Theateridia, that sounds like some sort of disorder.
We'll start with the right hand mic over here before this gets worse.
Hey everyone, my name is Aaron.
Hello, Aaron.
Thank you again for this wonderful panel. And I wanted to ask, why doesn't Square show off more of their IP within Kingdom Hearts? Like, I'd love to see exploration of worlds in Bravely Default or other Final Fantasy games. It's almost always just Final Fantasy VII.
I would love Lara Croft in a Kingdom Hearts game.
Oh my God, that'd be
like,
amazing.
like you're just in Tarzan's jungle and then Lara Croft caps somebody.
The impression I get from Kingdom Hearts these days, and it actually makes me very curious to know where 4 is going, is I have heard that the licensing and the issues and how characters are portrayed on the Disney side, like they were very, very strict about all that. Whereas when the first 2 Kingdom Hearts came out, they were like, oh God, we're almost dead. Just take whatever you want. Just give us money. So now Disney is like, maybe Square does want more original characters, or their characters in Kingdom Hearts, but Disney's like, no, it has to be exactly like this, 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 and this. And that's why you kind of had that like MS3 of, just the Let It
Mystery
Go.
Science Theater.
The Mystery
Kingdom
Science
Hearts.
Theater of like,
Yeah.
they're watching her sing Let It Go, and I'm like, this is weird.
So weird. Yeah, that was definitely one of my least favorite things about Kingdom Hearts 3 was just the lack of even just Final Fantasy, but I would love to see that expanded to, Nier characters, Chrono characters. I think that could be really cool.
Could you imagine
I
Nier in
can't
Kingdom Hearts?
handle
Oh my
2D in
God,
Kingdom
that would be
Hearts. That's too much.
Right?
Kingdom Hearts by Yoko Taro? This
That-
has to
I don't know if my
That-
brain could survive it, honestly.
It's got to stay T-rated. All right, we gotta keep it.
I
there.
think a big part of it is that when it was first created, Kingdom Hearts as a franchise, it was such a strange crossover. It's like it needed that Final Fantasy infusion to get really any RPG players to pay attention to it. And as Kingdom Hearts has grown and become its own thing and has so many fans of it, they don't have to necessarily rely so much on Final Fantasy characters, which I don't agree with. And I think that's what we saw with Kingdom Hearts 3, where we saw so few Final Fantasy characters and really they only appeared in Remind. I'm hoping, like you said, that we will get more going forward, but I think for a while it was just, okay, we don't need them anymore. Sora, Riku, and the gang can carry their own sails. We don't need Leon anymore.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and Kingdom Hearts is strong. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Left-hand side, what you got?
Real emotion, cringe or cultural reset?
Wait, the Kenneth is about to flip a table over.
Cultural
Yeah,
reset.
that is true. Real emotion is fantastic. Having
Yep.
just played 10-2, that song slaps. So I'm more of a, was it 1,000 Wings? The one that she sings on top of the airship?
That one too.
1,000 Words?
1,000 words.
Wings.
Or less.
The words are suspended on wings. That's how it works. That's
They're both bangers, essentially.
yeah, it's a banger.
They're good.
Thank you for reminding us of that beautiful song. They still won't let Una play the Super Bowl. It's terrible. Right-hand side.
Hi. I just want to say I think a Trials of Mana style remake of Final Fantasy IX would be my favorite thing in the world. It's my favorite series.
It would slap.
I
think
actually
it'd be
really
cool.
like Trials of Mana very much.
I did
Some
too.
The
people-
remake was very good.
For my question, though, I don't know how to ask this, but do you feel Final Fantasy XVI will fall like back to the way Final Fantasy XV was, where it didn't feel complete until it got the DLC and everything else, or do we feel like we're going to get a complete package again?
Oh, like a segmented approach where they had like Kingsglaive. I saw Kingsglaive
where,
in
like,
theaters.
you
That was a weird
needed that to
experience.
feel like complete.
There were like 3 people at that showing at
It
10
was
p.m.
not,
at
I was
night.
one of them. It was not a good movie.
I
Yeah.
feel like, see, I don't know what engine they're using. I don't know if they've said what engine they're using, but I think that Square Enix has recently learned some very hard lessons about using their own in-house engine to do modern games. So they might be doing more switching over to third party like Unreal and whatnot. So I think hopefully that would expedite things, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, I could go either way. I'd like to say they learned their lesson with 15's kind of piecemeal approach, but then, we just got, 2 years ago, we got Kingdom Hearts 3, and that ending did not feel complete until Remind came out, and so it wasn't quite as egregious as the multi-part 15, but it didn't feel complete without Remind, so, they might do that again. I hope not.
Yeah. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it feels a lot like Final Fantasy XIV, honestly, with Yoshi P doing it. I think you'll have a very good kind of complete story with maybe some additional things dropping afterwards, like the 6.1 and whatnot. I could see something similar to that, but I
Yeah.
think you will have a much more complete experience with 16 than you did 15.
I think we just live in a world where now where like games as service is assumed at this point, and maybe the service is not something like Anthem or anything like that where it's going to have problems, but it's definitely something where you pretty much assume that the game you're going to get up front is something that will be iterated on later through either patches or content updates. But what I will say to Square's credit is you look at things like Octopath and Triangle Strategy, and those are rounded games. Like those,
Very true.
You purchase that game, you own that game, and so far they seem pretty content to, if they're going to add more to it, they're going to do new things with it. They're going to make new entries. They're not necessarily going to just DLC on top of that. So
Do you think that's more of Nintendo's influence, though?
could be, possibly could be. I mean, so, not to brag, but I interviewed the producer, Asano, about Triangle Strategy not that long ago. But he was very adamant about saying, like, we want to tell a complete story and then move on to the next thing. We don't really want to mess around with DLC too much. And I think at least for the stuff we were talking about, the HD 2D stuff that is coming out of that division, there is more of a drive to want to do that sort of thing. But when it comes to the big budget stuff, I mean, it makes money when they do DLC, and they do need to make money at the end of the day to pay all the people to make all those triple triad cards I'm collecting right now. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Left-hand side, what's up?
So first off, I just want to say thank you guys so much for this panel. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
for
for
coming.
being here.
The question I have for you guys is, with Final Fantasy VII Remake, we all know they're kind of taking some liberties with the story. And there
Some
is
is
a
nice way of saying
certain
that.
death in the game. I won't name for anyone who hasn't played it, but I think we all know.
Dumbledore.
Of course. And I've had a debate with a bunch of my friends on if that death is even going to happen in Remake Part 2. What is your guys' thought on that?
I think they're going to troll us. I don't know how. I don't know how it's going to go down, but I feel like there's going to be a twist, so to speak, and it's gonna probably be a lot of fun and probably blow our minds. I'm going to be disappointed, but I don't care.
What if they kill Cloud?
Right.
I'm
Game over.
saying,
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Pieces are in place for them to pull something like that, and honestly, I want them to swing for the fences like that, because if you want to play Final Fantasy VII, there is no shortage of ways to play Final Fantasy VII these days, trust me. Like, you can throw a rock and hit a port of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
But I do like I said before, that the remakes are trying to do something new and really grapple with the idea of what remaking Final Fantasy VII means and whether they can tell a new story with that work. And would I love a game where Aerith with a chair becomes the new protagonist? Maybe. The
There's a
Buster
mod for
chair.
that.
Of course there's a mod for that.
There's a mod for that.
I want a whole game just with Tifa and Aerith buddying up and doing their own thing together because their
Yes, buddy.
relationship and
Is that not the romance of that game? I thought that was the romance of that game.
yeah,
Okay,
right.
Cool. Yeah, okay.
right.
You're right.
I agree with you, Nadia. I think they're probably going to troll us and just throw us a huge curveball. If I had to say yes or will they or won't they, I have a feeling that death will still occur, but there might be a twist surrounding it.
Except for how he stabs himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're gonna do now.
You hate to see it. Trips falls on his own sword. I mean, I will say, even for people who remember 7 and remember that twist originally, with how charismatic they made Aerith in Remake Part 1 alone, like
Yeah.
completely different character to me, honestly. And now, well, I guess I spoiled it for anyone who hasn't played it, but come on. Who has not played that game, or at least not know that part. I would be like heartbroken if it happens again because it will hurt that much more this time. So
So much more.
maybe they should.
Square
do
likes
it,
to
is what
hurt
I'm
us. I can
saying.
say that much for Bond Square. So prepare yourselves, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right hand side, how you doing?
Hi, thank you. I actually have 2 questions, if that's okay. They're both kind of off the wall, so I apologize in advance.
They're on the wall.
Off the wall.
Where are they?
I don't know. Kind of out here. a
Are they
little
just
bit.
floating?
Yeah. So, do you think they're gonna do more Stranger of Paradise style games
God, I
with
hope
each
so.
individual
Yes.
title?
God, I hope so.
I would love to see that, but I don't think they are. I don't think Stranger of Paradise sold very well to hear the tittle tattle.
I like when they embrace the weird, so I'd like to see that happen, but I don't know. The sales weren't there, and they seem not to have been. It's hard to imagine.
And they spent all that money on the Frank Sinatra rights. so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm liking this age of Square and Nintendo licensing their franchises out to do things like Cadence of Hyrule and Stranger of Paradise, and I'd like to see more of that for sure. I think the Advance Wars remake is being done by Way Forward.
Yeah, it is.
So like the more that those large companies start to maybe take some things and let other companies handle them and put their own spin on it, definitely, I would love to see that. Will it happen? I don't know. Go out and buy a copy of Stranger of Paradise.
Already bought 3. My second question is, do you think when they inevitably do Final Fantasy X-3 that they're gonna go the Braska R-Inject route, or do you think they're gonna follow the audiobook?
Oh God, Ken and I.
Oh,
Don't
is that
follow
the-
the audiobook.
Is the audiobook one where
The
he
audiobook's
just kicks the bomb and dies?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the
Oh,
one
and
where
they used
he
to do
just
that.
kicks a blitz ball and blows up because it was actually a bomb.
Yeah, just a side
And
note
that's
here.
not even the weirdest thing that happens in that.
Oh my God.
I like the art though. It was good art.
Oh yeah, there's some good art of like older Yuna and older Titas that look kind of cool, but yeah, I would desperately hope that they just at least non-canonize that middle part of the post-10 stuff, the audio drama stuff. There's some like maybe interesting ways they could take it, but it would also be a case of why not just do new? I don't think 10 needed more story in the first place, and I like to see them do new things with Final Fantasy, or if they're going to do something, just, I don't know, go back and remake 10, or just make it look really, really good, because it would still look really, really good nowadays, so. Play Final Fantasy X. It's a great video game.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm going to combine both of your ideas. I think if they'll do another hack and slash
Stranger of
Final
Paradise
Fantasy game,
10-3.
but it's going to be with Braska, Orin, and Jekt in a Stranger of Paradise like hack and slash game.
Oh man.
Okay.
With
I like it.
With your custom character maybe. Space guy or
we
the
put
unknown, or
Jack
who knows what they'll
Garland?
work it in, but I could see that.
Can
Could be
Jack
kinda fun.
Garland join YRP and be the 4th member of YRP?
That's the DLC.
Yeah, let's do it. I love to embrace the weird. I hope they do a 10-3. I'll take the opposite approach and say 10 is one of, if not my favorite game in the series. I loved 10-2 as well. I loved the extension of the story. And there are elements of the novel, 2.5, that are interesting, that are intriguing, but then they go do the really stupid stuff and Tita's blowing himself up, and it's like unnecessarily
When
edgy
we
and
did the
stupid.
podcast on Actually the Blood God and someone told us about Titus kicking the bomb and blowing himself up, Kat, the host, who's not here unfortunately, I haven't seen her laugh that hard. Like she was dying.
Yeah. The first time you hear it, you think someone's messing with you, like Mew under the truck in Pokemon
Yeah.
Red. Thank you for your question.
Still trying to push
Thank
that
you.
truck.
Thank you.
Left-hand side, how you doing?
Hi there. So you guys have acknowledged sort of how hit or miss some of Square's projects can be. How concerned should we be with Square's president recently making comments about NFTs?
I don't know. It's if somebody gave me like $10,000 right now, I'd say, sure, yeah, NFTs are great. I'd do nothing. I'd take $10,000 and walk away and do nothing about it. So that's kind of how I look at this. Is I do think it's a little bit of playing to the hype in order to keep a lot of people who have a lot of money happy. If they do put NFTs into any of their games, I imagine it will be immediately shouted down. And there's been so many examples of games trying to incorporate NFTs. Ghost Recon Breakpoint, that have just failed catastrophically, that I think a lot of the people who are making those decisions are already seeing that's probably not a good idea. So as long as it stays away from 14.
Once investors get bored with the very acronym NFT, they'll go away.
Yeah. I don't think you have to worry too much about it. I agree with everything you said, basically.
I think by the time Final Fantasy XVI comes out, NFT will just be a funny footnote in history that,
Yes, funny.
people
Let's
will,
hope so.
will point at. I mean, just looking at how NFTs, like the sales and like the value have dropped already, that
Yeah.
you don't really see people talking about them anymore unless it's like, I don't know, for a Rally's commercial,
Twitter
I don't
bots.
know, but
Twitter bots, yeah.
Twitter bots and things like that. So I think by the time the big, you might have them in mobile games. I could see that, maybe them trying that in mobile games, but like in your mainline Final Fantasy titles, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I'm not very worried.
We're not going to have the board Scion Yacht Club, we don't have to worry about that. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I share your concerns, though. Right-hand side.
Hey there. I was actually going to ask about Strangers of Paradise 2, but instead, what are your feelings about a Mythic Quest remake?
I would take it. I don't
Hell
care.
yeah.
I would take it.
Sure.
I have a soft spot in my heart for Mystic Quest, despite its issues and its history and its context. I love that weird little game, and that soundtrack slaps.
It has a surprisingly
very
good
good.
soundtrack.
Yeah.
What was the name of the pro tag? Had the most generic American name ever.
Benjamin.
Benjamin. That's it.
So it's like Brian from Quest 64. You got Brian and Benjamin, the hero of light, or
Great
whatever
hero.
he was. Yeah.
Thank you.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you.
Left hand, how you doing?
Hi, my name is Francois.
Hi.
Of all the
Howdy.
unique worlds that Square has created for the Final Fantasy games, which one would you like them to revisit again for another game?
I just said that Spira would not be a good idea, so I feel like I would have to backtrack to say that again.
It's Spira for me.
Yeah.
It's definitely Spira for me.
I'm going Ivalice. I think there's so much in Ivalice, and revisiting it would mean more tactics, maybe. So, but no, Ivalice is such a rich in lore that they've sprinkled in. I'd love to go back to Ivalice again.
I'd probably go to Eorzea. That's it. Why would I
They're
not?
in Eorzea
Have you ever
right now.
stopped
No.
visiting
You've
Eorzea,
never
though?
stopped
No.
visiting
You have to
Eorzea.
not be there.
Do you just want to play 14 right now? Is that what you're telling us?
I've stopped 14 for a little bit just to get obsessed with Elden Ring, but yeah.
What if we put Eorzea in Elden Ring?
Oh, now that's intriguing. I had
See,
seen people
that's
match up
where Stranger of
characters and
Paradise could go.
There'll be a crossover, Good idea, though. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right-hand side, how you doing?
Yeah, what's going on? All right, so favorite Final Fantasy villain, I'm going to give it out to Caius from 13.2 because
Good
13.2 was
That's a
great.
good pick. Yeah.
That's a really Caius love. I respect it. Man, I need a little time to think about that. But you guys have any answers so far?
Elidibus. I can't say anymore because it's a huge spoiler.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Nice.
People know.
Is that 14?
Basically,
Yeah, that's
sorry,
a
that's
14
14.
one. Yeah.
14.
Basically,
That's
it broke my
cheating.
heart. That was the first time Final Fantasy XIV just destroyed me. With that whole 5.3, which Eric is coming up on, and I'm just like
Yeah.
hooting over him like a vulture.
Yeah. Shout outs to 8. We have not talked about Final Fantasy 8 much, but
Yes.
Yeah.
Ultimecia
Eight's
is a
cool.
fun villain. Really cool design, and I think thematically really interesting to that game. So I'll
She
use
does
my
the
shout
whole-
out there.
She has a whole Mortal Kombat thing of
Yeah.
compression with a K. I think Caius comes close, but I think I got to give it to Kefka at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's Kefka. He is irredeemable. He's not like tragic like Sephiroth. He's just awful and commits genocide, and he's just got nothing redeemable about him. It's got to be Kefka.
Stop by our panel, defend your video game problematic faves tomorrow.
Yeah.
Scott, did you give one of these guys?
Favorite villain. My favorite is. Yeah, I don't know. Demon Wall. Man, he's just an angry wall.
He's very scary when you're young.
He is.
Wait, our
terrifying.
boss is on? Because I'm putting
No.
Phantom Train on. If we can.
I
talk
gotta
about
go
just boss.
Ultros. I love Ultros.
Ultros,
okay.
yeah.
It's whenever he shows up, like his little quips and everything. He was in 13 too, so he's no Gilgamesh. I like Gilgamesh the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was kind of hoping you'd say Genesis, just to get some random weirdness up here. Just
Don't I have to like pay Square if I mention it?
I think you do. I think we
now.
all do. Sorry, Square. Yeah, fine.
But no, Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh. Okay. Thank you very much. Left-hand side.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing all right. Thank you for
Thanks.
asking. No one
Yeah.
else did.
So I have 2 quick questions. It's mainly for Nadia and Eric. Hi guys.
Oh no.
Do you guys know Lahi?
Lahi. Oh, when I was playing through that, just every time I would have some very, very serious scene, and then I'll dump out of it and just Lahi right into my eardrums. Cursed patch. Cursed place.
I try to visit that location at night.
The nocturnal Lahi, the forbidden
Yeah.
Lahi. Okay.
And so the second question is a more serious one this time. So we saw the remake of Chrono Cross released recently. Do you guys see any of the other possible Square games from like old school? I'm talking about like, let's say Threads of Fate, even Xenogears.
Oh, dear me.
I mean,
So do you guys see them coming back, or are they more of a niche kind of?
I don't see
game.
Xenogears coming back. I think that's all
I don't.
Nintendo's domain now. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
love it if they brought back something like Brave Fencer Musashi or Parasite Eve.
That'd be great.
Yeah, give me Brave Fencer.
Parasite Eve.
Parasite Eve would be incredible.
Yeah.
Scott, you got any wish list ones?
I was gonna say Brave Fencer.
Okay.
That's a really good one.
There,
Oh,
guys.
God bless the ring.
God bless the ring. Square's Smash Brothers.
Yeah,
Vagrant Story,
Vagrant
yes,
Story.
absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Crimson Shroud. Was that Square? No, that was I don't think that was Square. Close enough, but I want to give a
Bouncer. I want a new Bouncer game.
Bouncer.
And that's what I was
what
going
I
to say is we're going to wrap this panel by saying the bouncer should be remade. That's all we have. That's all she wrote. That is the end of the Axe of the Blood God PAX East panel. Thank you so much to everyone who came out. Please go to our Patreon.
Thank you, everybody.